Good morning, Representative Bakers. House File 1355, I believe there's an amendment.
There will be an amendment. I'll introduce that in a minute if I could,
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Very good.
And Mr. Chair, I'd like to move House File 1355 to be re-referred to the Committee on Environment after this stop. And if I could, I'd like to proceed.
Very good.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. It was December 16th in 2024, this is last December, that I received an email from David Anderson to help on a piece of legislation, something called Scuba Lake Weeds Company. That's all it was. As I read further, I saw what happened to his son Joseph last May. This is less than a year ago. And what happened. And then I read the same email 2 years prior, another young man, Brady Aunes, which is why we're here today, is to address something that really was missed. The families are both with us today, and they need to share their stories, to tell us about Brady and Joseph, and what we need to do as legislators to make sure that we help this never, ever happens again. What we found out is that some operators do this service actually quite well. Decent training, et cetera, but some do nothing. And we need to make sure we get that side fixed up. We've been working alongside the Department of Labor to make sure that we have the language right. We're still working on this bill. But Mr. Chair, again, I'd like to also at this time move then the A2 amendment to the bill. And I will just describe it as simply saying, the A2 amendment, we're going to call this the Brady Aunes and Joseph Anderson Safety Act. So I'd like to move, Mr. Chair, that we include the A2 as my author's amendment.
So moved. Oh, sorry. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Motion
You do have
prevails
a lot of
clearly.
power, but not that much power. So, Mr. Chair and members, I need to turn it over to the families. And again, there's a couple testifiers, and I know that some might have to go quickly, but we'll see how this goes as far as other testifiers. With that, Mr. Chair, I'll bring in the Anderson and the Aunes family. Thank you.
David and Lori, if you will identify yourself and please proceed.
Absolutely. Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is David Anderson, and I'm here today with my beloved wife, Lori Anderson. We live in Plymouth, Minnesota. If I could, Mr. Chair, I know you have a very strict time requirement. If you could just give me a little deference, please. It's critical that you hear this stuff, right? We are strongly in support of this bill, and I'm going to explain the reasons why, tell you a little bit about Joseph, who sits there on your left, our fifth son, and really a call to action, please, for you, because there's just some urgent things we need to do before this spring starts again. Let me tell you a little bit about Joe and the kind of guy he was. He was 18 years old at the time of his death. He was a very active, safety-conscious kind of a person who was also kind of in love with the water. He was attending Bethel University in his final year of high school, taking college credits, right, so that he could graduate high school with the goal of having 2 years of college credits under his belt, where he could then come into Grand Canyon University as a junior in standing. So he was very driven to kind of get where he wanted to go, right? That spring, he was approached by an alumni at Bethel University where he was with kind of this offer of a great job to be outside in the sun, in the water, harvesting lake weeds, which for many of us, we don't really think about that, but there's actually a business out there today, many businesses actually, that do what is called scuba lake weed removal, where they literally strap on scuba tanks, masks, and gears, and you go down into the water and pluck out the weeds. Significant business for the land of 10,000 lakes. It sounded interesting to Joe because he could be outside with guys his age, be in the sun, be in the water, to kind of do that kind of fun thing. So he accepted the job. Lori and I asked questions of him. It sort of made sense. We didn't get all the information from the employer, but he started that work. At the time of his accident, it was his third day on the job. And let me just tell you a little bit about that day, because it goes into what this really brings about. Monday, May 21st of last year was one of those days in Minnesota, we all know, where it's so dark outside that the streetlights come on, right? It was a severe storm kind of a day. And he was told to go to a lake called Lac Lavon Lake down in Apple Valley, Minnesota. Lac Lavon Lake is a former quarry. It's what we call, as we learned, a dirty lake. There's no real input to it. It just is there, and the nutrients from the soil kind of grow those weeds. He got to the job site at about 8:30 that morning and was on the dock. It was his first day ever of using scuba equipment, and he had less than 15 minutes of training. And I'm going to talk with you a little bit about the training in just a second. But after 15 minutes, he was put in the water. He was told, and Lori and I were told, that he was going to be operating in 6 to 8 feet of water, right? And that kind of made sense to us. Okay, that doesn't seem that deep, that's scary. There was a young man, 19 years old, who was the supervisor that day on the dock watching. And after several minutes, they didn't see any more bubbles, and they lost him. He wasn't with a buddy. He wasn't tied off. He wasn't anything. He was by himself. That person dove into the water. His name was Ty, and searched for Joe in 6 to 8 feet of water. Didn't find him. Ultimately, he did find him in 20 feet of water. His respirator was off. He wasn't breathing. He was brought to the surface. They put him on the dock, and this supervisor named Ty, a 19-year-old young man, was not CPR certified, tried to do something. He was not breathing. He was not responsive. Luckily, the Apple Valley PD and fire department was 5 minutes away, and they rolled a crew and got to Joe and immediately started CPR. He was given 3 epinephrine shots into his heart to get his heart beating again. Ultimately, he got his heart working, and they got him to Fairview Ridges Hospital down in Apple Valley. Lori and I were called at about 9:30 that morning to come as quickly as possible. We never were able to talk to him again, but we were able to hold his hand and be with him. Heroic efforts were undertaken at the hospital there to bring him back. He had a pulse, he was breathing on a ventilator, but he never regained consciousness. They brought him Monday night of the 21st to the University of Minnesota hospitals, where there's some of the best neurologists in care that you can imagine. And heroic efforts were undertaken, and they did everything they could. But after 3 days, he passed on Friday, May 24th, at about 9 o'clock at night. There isn't a minute, an hour, or a day where I don't think about him. It is an awful, awful process. As we struggled through our grief, everyone we talked to, without a doubt, right, who has either done scuba diving or been involved in the water or rescue or fire department personnel, all said this made no sense. How could this be? How could something like this take place with less than 15 minutes of training? This just makes no sense. And I'm kind of one of those people, and I hope I instilled this in my son, that you need to do something. You need to get better and not be bitter. And we had the chance to meet with Commissioner Nicole Blissenbach in December of this year. Bill and Dina and I got to meet her. Lovely lady. And we learned this, and this is what's kind of critical of why we're here. Minnesota adopts the federal OSHA law, right? And there are standards that we have adopted in the state of Minnesota. The challenge, and the reason this bill is in front of you, is there are gaps in the OSHA law of specifically around what kind of training needs to take place and what kind of safety gear needs to be on these young men and women when they're in the water. It wasn't that there isn't something there. It just says that they should have training, and then it says it should have some safety equipment. And what we learned from her and her staff and developed over time that you see in the bill here is 2 critical items. First, that the employees need to be scuba certified. And I don't know how many of you have ever scuba dived or done this, but right, if you were to go as your family on a vacation and go scuba diving in crystal clear, beautiful waters, you'd have to do these things. Listen to this. You have to go through 7 to 9 hours of online or classroom training. Once you complete that, you then go into a warm pool 3 feet deep with a dive instructor. And they teach you how to use scuba equipment. They teach you how, if your respirator comes off, how to put it back on. Because naturally, when you run out of air, you panic. So it teaches you those skills, right? That's another 4 to 5 hours. After you pass that, and only after you pass that, are you allowed to go in a lake. When you go in a lake, you go in with a dive instructor. They take you down. They are with you the whole time. That's another 4 to 6 hours. And then and only then could you or I scuba dive. Joe, again, had less than 15 minutes, and Brady, that you're going to hear about, had 0. They didn't have a chance, ladies and gentlemen. The second thing that's needed, that's in this legislation, is what's called a BCD, a buoyancy control device. I have sent to the committee a package of information, and there's even a picture of one of these. And the best way I can describe it is it's kind of like when you get on an airplane and the attendant shows you that yellow vest you put on your neck in the case you go in the water. It's a more sophisticated version of that. But what it has at the bottom, and you'll see on the picture, is a red handle. If you get in a situation where you need to come to the surface, you pull the tab. It brings you to the surface. We strongly feel, both the Aunes families and ours, that if Joe and Brady had had training and had a BCD, we wouldn't be here today, ladies and gentlemen. It is just critical, critical things to do. So a call to action for you. I know you're very busy. I know it's been a hectic session to start, but we desperately seek your approval of this bill. It's not a Democratic or a Republican issue. It's a human issue. And I believe all of you came into politics to do the right thing and right wrongs. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a thing that needs to be righted. This is a wrong that needs to be fixed. And it's so easy to do. It's right here in the legislation. And then the last thing, please, is urgency. Again, I know you're busy. I know there's a lot going on. Spring will be here, ladies and gentlemen, before we know it. Both companies that killed our sons are still in business today. You can go to their websites. They're taking appointments for this spring. Without this legislation, young men and women are going to go back in the water, and it's not if, it's when they will die. We've had 2 deaths in less than 2 years. Please, please pass this bill to prevent this living hell from occurring again to another family. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Honey?
Thank you. Oh,
My name is Lori Anderson, and I am Joe's mom. And I'm just here today because I hope to help the next teenager and the next parents and family. Nothing that I say or do today is going to bring him back, but I do feel a strong responsibility to save the next kids. We were horrified to hear of how things went that day. My husband basically said most of the things I want to say, but I just want to also add that he was within 10 feet of a 25-foot drop-off. I don't even think he had any idea of that. We don't even know if the 19-year-old who was in charge that day, who was a fellow college student, had any idea that he was that close to a drop-off. We realized that there's just a hole in the laws. We trusted the company, we trusted the industry, and we trusted the laws to keep him safe. And there's just a big hole, and that's why we're here today. The big thing with those vests, I don't know if it's in the materials, but they are less than $300. And to think that that could have saved our boys' lives, it's so simple. And the certification just does not sound like a hardship to these companies. Many of these companies are already operating that way, that requiring that certification. So it doesn't seem like it's a big step or hardship for these companies to do, especially to save a life. The biggest thing that affected me when we've been through other hearings like this was to hear the scuba experts and some of the companies who are trying to do things right tell us that these 2 deaths were 100% preventable. That just really hit me. It was very, in my opinion, easy to prevent this from happening, but they didn't take the steps to keep him safe or to keep Brady safe. I just want to take a minute to tell you, I'll be quick, Joe was just a really good kid. He was, as my husband said, he was motivated, he was smart, he was a hard worker, he wanted to get ahead. He was trying to save money for college. That's why he took this job, because he thought it was good money. It was like $20 an hour. Again, and the last thing I want to say is just that my husband said it's urgent. And that is something, honestly, that kind of haunts me, is the season is starting up again in 2 months. And there's just an urgency. I, as a mom, and seeing this happen, I don't believe it is a if it will happen again. I really believe it is a when it happens again, if something doesn't change. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that. Next, we have Dina and Bill. If you could introduce yourself and please proceed.
Thank you, committee members. My name is William Aunes, and I'm the father of Brady Aunes. As you know, 2 young men lost their lives working for companies doing weed removal. Both young men were using scuba diving equipment that they were not trained for. I know in Brady's case, Brady and our family were assuming that he would be properly trained before he ever put on scuba equipment in the water, which was a totally reasonable assumption. The reason why they did not have the proper training and were subjected to such an extreme level of risk is because the employers did not have to do this. Only when you mandate employers to comply with safety standards will the job become safe for employees. As history has shown, without agency regulations, employers will take advantage of employees. This was definitely the case with dive guys whom Brady was employed with. He was paid $16 an hour for a job that his employers knew was dangerous. Although dive guys was fined by OSHA, this would do little to protect employers doing the same work. I'm a firefighter with the city of Minneapolis. When we go into fires, we use very similar equipment to scuba diving. In fact, we call our equipment SCBAs. We just leave out the U for underwater. Fire and water are both equally fatal if your equipment and training are not adequate. I think about how much training I had before I was able to go into a fire, and I think about how much training Brady and Joe had, and it was almost zero. I am forced to think of how many near misses there must have been before there were 2 fatalities. The only thing more tragic to me than losing my son at age 20 would be if this were to happen to another family, and it did. It happened to the Andersons. My regret as a father is that we were not able to move quickly enough to try to make this safer for employees. We have most of the pieces in place now to make sure that this does not happen again, but none of this will happen without your support to move this forward. You, senators and representatives, now have the power to save lives. I am quite certain that if you vote yes on this bill, there will most likely not be any more deaths. But if you decide to vote against it, I am certain that there most likely will be more tragedy. The industry did not become dangerous once there were 2 fatalities. It has been dangerous, and fatalities were inevitable with the lack of training mandatory in this field. The Brady Aunes Joseph Anderson Safety Act is the definition of common sense legislation. We are asking for almost no funding, and this is definitely not an overreach of government regulation into industry. Minnesota State OSHA immediately recognized the need for this legislation, and they want this to go through. Every scuba diver that I talk to is shocked by this, and they want this to go through. Every senator and representative that I've talked to so far wants this to go through. But we, as the families of the 2 young men who lost their lives, were stolen, demand that this go through. Thank you.
Hello. My name is Dina Aunes. I'm Brady's mother. Thank you very much, Representatives and Chairman Baker, for taking the time to hear our testimony today. The following is a portion of a letter I wrote to the Hennepin County District Attorney regarding the criminal charges being considered in the death of our son. I want to ensure that in all this talk of regulations, that you hear the cautionary tale of what conduct is happening at some of these small companies under the lack of current regulations. Dear District Attorney, I know you are considering moving forward on Officer Nelson's recommendation of charging both the owner, Matt, and Supervisor Dominic of Dive Guys LLC with manslaughter due to the gross negligence she found in her investigation into our son's death. Brady was alive and well at breakfast on June 3rd and dead by lunch. He was ripped from this world in a neglectfulness so big in scale that it stole him from his life at 20 years old and from his family. He had exciting plans for that weekend. His car was packed that Friday with a helmet, skateboard, and guitar, and nice clothes he would never wear. The owner's carelessness with our boys to save $1 shattered his family and left his big brother and only child on day 4 of employment. A few weeks after Brady died, we received a phone call from a gentleman named Rod. He was a retired police officer who had gone to work for Dive Guys after he retired. He let us know all the danger that Brady had been in working for Matt that week. Rod quit working there because Matt was so unsafe with these boys. Rod had over 1,500 dives under his belt, so he knew an unsafe dive situation when he saw one. He tried many times to call Matt. I'm sorry. On the antiquated equipment and the BCD's vest those boys were not wearing, that they should have fins on, and they should have a backup breather regulator on in case they have issues. They should be trained and scuba certified. He complained that they don't always have someone watching the boys in case they get in trouble and don't come back up, like our Brady, so they're not pinned down to die alone and drowned alone. During the victim consultation with the district attorney, a year later, we found out that they noticed right away that Brady's weight belt was on backwards and inside out. Nobody looked at him that day. He couldn't release it when he got in trouble. Also, it was way too heavy for his body frame. During the investigation, they told us that they were lied to multiple times by the owner. But by interviewing fellow coworkers, they found out that that Friday they showed up, Dive Guy showed up at the wrong house. And the young supervisor, who was a kid himself, was in a hurry to kick off his weekend. So when they went to their 4th dive site that day, Brady was put out the deepest, even though he was the only new person. His partner said, "Hey, wait, I ran out of air. Hold on, Dom, I'm just going to go switch up my tank." When that employee came back down the hill, their safety supervisor was in the water working. He wanted to hurry. Nobody was watching those boys. He was quoted as running down the hill and saying, "Where the hell is Brady?" And Dom, the safety supervisor, was standing there with an armful of weeds and said, "What do you mean? They lost our boy that day. They lost him for 30 minutes. We were told by the Hennepin County Sheriff investigator that the worst part that they had to tell me was that Dom never dipped a toe in the water that day to look for Brady. Of course, if they would have found him in time, nobody was CPR certified, so they couldn't have saved him. So we, his family and friends, are broken and forever incomplete He really was a wonderful son, brother, and friend. Our lives have truly become a prison sentence that we must try and get through. He stole our youngest son and took his brother's wingman in life, his best man when he marries, and his children's only uncle. He stole our boy in future events, like watching him breathlessly when his bride walks down the aisle. The mother-son dance that will never be. The grandkids that we would have loved to have spoiled. We'll miss his hugs and smiles, and we know his laughter will never be heard again. Brady wanted to be a firefighter like his dad, and in fact, he was scheduled for the cadet class that started after that summer. He worked really hard for that. His 21st birthday came and went without him. He'll never even know what it feels like to be an official adult. Brady paid the ultimate price for the negligent workplace he worked for that week. However, we need to do this one last thing for these boys and help protect future boys to not become the next Brady. Just a little follow-up. Some of you may have seen the news stories on this, and that Bill and I stepped out on Brady's 2-year anniversary of his death to that property to lay flowers in the water. You may have seen that we stumbled upon dive guys again, clearing weeds at that house at the exact time. What you didn't see when you saw that those boys were unsupervised is that there was a boy in the water exactly where Brady died. And when his supervisor stumbled over to him after he had been down there for 30 minutes, he said, "How are you doing?" And the boy said, "I can't even see my hand in front of me down there, and I'm tired." You know what he told him? He told him to go back down there and finish the job. So, we pray our beautiful sons will be the last lives taken. Please help us to make this industry safe by voting in favor of the Brady, Aunes, and Joe Anderson safety bill. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We have a few more testifiers to get to, so we'll move to that so we can get to the vote on this, members. Dan Gruber via Zoom, and then after that will be Ryan Mueller. If you can identify yourself and please proceed.
Hi, I'm Dan Gruber. I am a scuba instructor and instructor trainer for multiple agencies. I'm just here to kind of testify on the fact of the importance of the scuba certification, the class that once you go through mostly teaches you how to respond to emergencies that you might come on while diving. It's a big thing as far as getting people to handle different situations that may come up. But while you're training with this, you're doing it with a professional who does all of this all the time and understands how to react to these situations. Every instructor is also a rescue diver on top of everything. So they are, besides knowing how to teach a class, also know how to react to all different types of emergencies. They're also all CPR certified. So if not a CPR instructor, so they can react to any situation if there was an incident while diving. The other part that I would like to touch base on is the equipment that's used and the importance of this equipment. There's a standard bit of equipment, with fins, BCD, regulators, backup regulators. This kind of stuff is very important to use while you're diving for different situations. I know there's been concerns of the BCD maybe getting silt and everything else and not working properly. I can assure you that I'm an instructor through personal or public safety divers. I've talked with some of the people that I've trained with, and these dive teams have BCDs that are 10 to 12 years old. As long as they're properly maintained, they will work completely fine while they're in the sediment and everything. Public safety divers are usually in the mud and in the weeds. Everything that these the weed companies would be in. So as long as you were to properly maintain the equipment, clean it every day, there should be no problems with any of that the sediments or anything would cause for that. So rescue divers, having somebody there that is a rescue diver is a huge thing, just due to the fact that they know how to react to any individual that would have any problems while they're out there. But in the case with both of these individuals, knowing how their equipment worked properly by being trained through scuba certification and actually hands-on with a professional helping them go through it and correcting any issues would definitely have gone a long way. That's all I got.
Thank you for that. Next, we have Ryan Mueller via Zoom.
Yeah, can you hear me?
We can hear you if you just identify yourself and proceed.
Yeah, thank you for including me. I apologize for getting called away. My name is Ryan Mueller. I am Brady's uncle. I also happen to be a hyperbaric technologist. What that is, that's somebody who works with dive injury. So I work at HCMC, and we actually do see people that are scuba divers that get conditions such as decompression sickness and arterial gas embolisms, and also drowning. So I'm a firefighter, as you can see. So I just wanted to quickly speak mainly from being Brady's uncle. I want to talk about, first off, what a special person Brady was. Brady was a very trusting person, and I think that's a very important point to make, just as the Andersons did. With this particular job, you would assume that there would be a standard of training, and unfortunately there was not. As Bill mentioned, my brother-in-law, as a firefighter, we go through extensive training with our SCBAs. And Brady, unfortunately, was not able to receive that training. But I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about that. I wanted to focus in on the practical aspects of that as quickly as I can. First was just that. Brady had no formal training and was never required to show that he understood how to operate his equipment. As I mentioned, I'm familiar with the dangers of diving. Almost invariably, emergencies occur due to failure with equipment and lack of sufficient training. Why is that? Because of panic. When a person panics, what helps to save that person isn't thinking through necessarily logically how to save yourself, it's muscle memory. Without sufficient training and familiarity with your equipment, you're not very likely to be able to figure out how to save yourself. As firefighters, we are required to go through months of training with zero visibility circumstances. People actually will purposely make our pack difficult to solve, if I could put it that way. They'll create situations where our pack isn't working correctly, and we have to figure out the problem while we're trying to breathe in the dark. Once again, we went through months of training with regards to this, and Brady got absolutely zero, and sounds like Joe got 15 minutes. Why I think there's such a parallel to firefighting is because when we depend on our gear to save our lives, what that means is if our gear stops working, we literally stop living. And it's a very parallel circumstance, as you can see here. As a hyperbaric technologist, I want to speak from that angle also. We're talking about death as being the only outcome of not having formal training. I do want to make the chair aware and senators aware that there's also injury that can occur even if you don't die. Part of what you learn when you go through your PADI certification is dive tables, and you understand at certain depths you are required to make certain stops if you stay at a certain depth for too long. So I just want to bring this home really fast. We mentioned that there was a drop-off nearby for Joe that was 25 feet. The dive charts really actually start at 25 feet. There's an obligation for you if you stay too long at the depth of 25 feet. But in the case of if it's, let's say, 30 feet, if you work more than 6 hours, just a little over 6 hours at 30 feet, you have an obligation as you come up to stop at a certain depth because you're at risk of the bends. And obviously, a full workday is 8 hours, and it's very likely, especially if you're working in a quarry, that you could find yourself in a situation where you fall to 30 feet without even knowing it. So it's important for people to understand how to look at their dive computers, work their dive computers, and understand what circumstances they are in. So we're not just talking about death. We're also considering that there could be dive injuries. However unlikely, it is something that could happen, and it's important for the boys that are diving to understand this. And the third point I want to make quickly, once again, as firefighter here, we are always going into fires with buddies. We're never going into a fire without a buddy. Brady was left alone. Think about that. Brady was left alone with gear, first off, that wasn't sufficient. He wasn't given the full gear. Brady was working on a job with no training, and he had nobody out there to help him if he got himself in trouble. And Brady had no way to alert anybody if he was in trouble. We have a 2-in, 2-out process with firefighters. We always are in there with a buddy, and we also have people outside that can relieve us or come in and save us if we are in a circumstance where we can't get ourselves out. And we also have a way of always alerting people if we are in a circumstance where we feel like our life is in danger. Brady wasn't allowed any of these benefits. These are just practical reasons. I can talk to you about how much I love Brady. I can talk to you about what an amazing person Brady was and how much I wish we had Brady with us today. But I realize the practical aspects are also what's going to drive this bill forward. I am in favor of this bill, and I hope that you can find it logical in your reasoning to see why this bill is necessary. As we mentioned previously, we realize this isn't a Republican-Democrat issue. It's just a common sense issue. And our concern is that we want to help the kids that haven't received any training, that are about to sign up for this job this spring, and maybe save some more lives, because we can't bear to see another family go through what our families have got through. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Mr. Mueller. The next testifier we have is Tom Surth, I believe. And if you can keep it to 2 minutes, we'd greatly appreciate it. Are they on Zoom? Yeah. Okay.
And thank
If
you,
would,
Mr. Chair.
There
I
you go.
just
Thank
want to
you.
make sure that we keep the testify quick, because we do have one more bill to do after this. So thank you for your shortness on this. Thank you.
Absolutely. Chair Baker, can you hear me?
Yep.
All right, Chair Baker, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I will shorten the testimony to respect your time. My name is Tom Stewart, and I'm the founder and president of Waterfront Restoration. We're a small business based in the Twin Cities metro area. For 22 years, we've specialized in lake weed removal performed by scuba divers. In our business, safety has always been a priority. We ensure that our employees receive proper scuba training and have the right safety equipment. But I know that not all employers in this industry have taken the same approach. Sadly, it appears that the tragic deaths of Brady and Joseph were the result of them not receiving the most basic scuba training needed for the job. To do hand harvesting efficiently, scuba diving is necessary, but the nature of this specific type of diving is unique. It's often done in very shallow water, typically less than 10 feet deep. Often it is shallow enough where the diver can stand and their head is above water. While weeds can grow in up to 20 feet of water, this accounts for only a small portion of the work. Either way, at these shallow depths, risks are generally very low. In my 22 years of doing this work, myself and my team have completed over 25,000 jobs with 3 to 5 divers in the water on each. During that time, we've never had any serious incident or fatality or anything close to that. While the overall risk of scuba diving or scuba lake weed removal is low, a lack of basic training can turn routine work into a dangerous situation. This bill addresses that gap by establishing clear, reasonable training and safety standards that we think businesses can follow without excessive costs. As an operator in the field, I support this legislation because it ensures that all businesses are held accountable for providing proper training and equipment for their employees. We will continue to work with the bill's authors to refine the regulations. It's critical that we get this right so that businesses can and will follow it. The young men who lost their lives deserve to be honored with meaningful action from the state that prevents future tragedies. To the Aunes and Andersons, as a father of a young boy myself, I'm heartbroken and cannot imagine the pain you've endured. I appreciate you bringing this to the legislator because change is absolutely needed. As this bill progresses through the legislative process, my staff and I stand ready to help ensure that all safety concerns are addressed and that the final outcome is a law that effectively achieves its intended impact. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. With that, we're going to move to member questions. Representative Hussein.
Chair Baker and the family of Brady and Joseph, I'm really sorry what happened to your child.
Pull your mic in a little bit. There you go.
Can you hear me now? Yeah.
Better, thanks.
And it is a tragedy, and I do have a child, a boy, 2 boys, and this is not one thing that I would never wish to happen to. Those companies should be held accountable. They should be trained. They should be equipped for those childs. Because imagine, graduating almost in high school and finding a job. You're excited. You don't know what you're signing into until you are right there because you're excited. This is your first paycheck. You want to make sure that you do the right thing. You want to make your family proud. And we'll pray for those child. They should be here with us. They should be here with us. Every person that should go to work should be back safe at home. And it is important for those companies to follow for the safety for the employee and keeping them healthy to be back at work. They should have trained. They should have equipment and the resources that they need for those child should be equipped. This should never happen in our state. And this bill is very important that you're bringing forward. We need to make sure that we support so that we don't lose any other child. We don't lose any other youth in this difficult and challenges. You panic when even if you're in a swimming pool, you panic. You need the skills and you need the training. As the officer stated in earlier that firefighters and people that dive, they need more training, hours and hours and hours. And I look forward to supporting this bill, and we want to make sure that we hold accountability for those companies that's doing the work. They need to take care of their employee, and they need to take care for our young generations. And thank you for both parents for coming forward. It is brave for you to come and testify in front of us. I'm really hurt, and I'm really sorry for what happened to your child, and we'll pray for them to be in heaven, and they're in a better place for all of us. And I know we're not going to get them back, but we'll make sure that no more child is going to happen this. Thank you.
Members, we have a few more questions. If you can keep it brief, Representative Zlaznikar.
Thank you, Chair, and to the families. It's heartbreaking. I think I've heard a lot of testimonies in the last 3 years, but as a mom of 2 sons, and to see young men and women in this situation is beyond senseless. It is shocking in a land of 10,000 lakes, and most of them are murky in the state of Minnesota. To not have common sense practices in place was just unbelievable and unbearable to listen to feel the horror of your pain. And so on behalf of all of us here, I mean, there's tears and sadness because we can't bring your kids back, but we will vote for what's right, what was always right, to do the right thing, and to save lives. And I'm sorry that you have this pain in your heart, and we'll pray for you.
Representative Greenman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Chair Baker, for bringing this bill, and to the families of Joe and Brady. Our laws failed you and failed your kids, and this bill will save lives, and it's correcting folks. One, and I know we don't have much time, but just 2 things that came out of your testimony that I think we should think about including in this bill. One is the CPR, having somebody who can do CPR. I heard that from both of you. When I became a babysitter as a kid, I had to take a Red Cross CPR class, so having somebody who can do that life-saving resuscitation. I have learned scuba, and it took me 5 days, and I still went with a scuba instructor, and I couldn't do the murky water clear. And then the other thing that I heard you say is urgency. And I think we should put in an effective date that is effective upon enactment, if that's possible. And those are the 2 things, just in response to your testimony. Thank you. This has clearly been a lot of work, Chair Baker, and to the families. This will make Minnesota better and safer, so thank you for that.
Chair Baker, if you would like to renew your motion to send this to Environment, Natural Resources as amended, and final comments.
Yeah, members, thank you so much for the conversation. Again, I can't thank the families enough for this. We do plan on presenting to the Environment Committee next, and we're still working on the bill. We're working in a super bipartisan manner, so if you want to sign on the bill, we'd love to have your support. House File 1355, and Senator Bolden and I are working across the aisle on this very much so. Again, we want to make sure we get it right. We've got providers that do it well. We've got others that are doing it terribly. So we're going to get it fixed, we're going to get it ready, and it's going to, when it launches, it's going to be right. So with that, members, I do ask for your support on House File 1355 to move on to the Environment Committee.
Members, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
All right, thanks, guys.
Motion prevails. Yeah.